Wellness for Life is brought to you by Back in Motion Physical Therapy, Gothenburg Chiropractic Clinic, Mahabi Atwa Community Action Partnership, Natural Alternatives, and Lakeside Sports and Pain Clinic.
Hello, I'm Matthew Kaufenberg, physical therapist and owner of Back in Motion Physical Therapy in Perham as well as Park Rapids, Minnesota. On today's episode, I thought I would talk a little bit about joint hypermobility. So what does that mean? So we just look at the term joint hypermobility. Well, what's a joint? Simply put, a joint is where two bones come together. So you've got your shoulder joint where you've got your arm bone and your shoulder blade come together to create a joint. You've got your knee joint, two bones coming together. You know, in your finger, you've actually got three joints. So you've got this little bone and this little bone, they come together to create a joint. And then you've got this little bone and this one, they come together to create a joint. And then you've got your third joint here. So simply put, a joint is where two bones come together. And then the word hypermobility means too much motion. So simply put, joint hypermobility means you've got too much motion at those spots where two bones come together. It's actually quite common. There are some studies out there that suggest that up to 13% of the population has some form of joint hypermobility. And joint hypermobility can create some pretty significant issues later on in life. So you're going to want to know if you've got it. So at the end of this episode, I'm going to give you a really quick test that you can do at home to determine if you've got joint hypermobility. So why do we have it? Why are there certain people that have joint hypermobility? So what it comes down to is people with joint hypermobility, they're ligaments. So a ligament, I depicted the ligaments here in blue. A ligament is simply stated, a ligament attaches two bones together. So this is the shoulder joint, and here's your shoulder blade, and then the arm bone coming down. So the structures in blue are the ligaments of the shoulder joint, and those ligaments attach the arm bone to the scapula. So again, a ligament is just a structure. It's a piece of connective tissue that holds two bones together. So individuals with joint hypermobility, those ligaments lack some collagen. So collagen is a substance within our ligaments that, in essence, it acts as a glue. It holds those ligaments together. But those who have hypermobility they don't have enough of that collagen. So the ligaments themselves are more mobile, they're more stretchable. And when they become more stretchable and movable, that joint will start to move around quite a bit. So with joint hypermobility, there are three things that can occur. So if your ligamentous structures allow the joint to move too much, you can end up with arthritis, you can end up with sprains and or strains, or you can end up with bursitis and or tendonitis. So with arthritis, so if we look at a joint where two bones come together, you do not want a bone to hit another bone. So there's usually a structure in between, and that's going to be cartilage, and that's what's depicted in red. That's the cartilage. So you want a shock absorber, and you want something that's going to reduce friction because you don't want the bone hitting the bone. So now if you've got a ligament that is too mobile, and that joint is now going to move too much, it can cause some damage to the labrum. So this is going to be my cartilage. In the shoulder, it's called the labrum, so I apologize for throwing that term out. But this is the cartilage of the shoulder joint. And here's the joint coming together. Now, in a normal situation, the joint might only move this much. So not a lot of wear and tear on that cartilage. But with someone who has hypermobility, the joint might move a lot. And so the whole component of that cartilage is going to get rubbed on, and eventually it's going to erode, and it's just going to kind of wear down as time goes on. So over time, what happens is that cartilage gets broken down, the cartilage starts to disappear because it's being rubbed upon, and then now all of a sudden you're going to get the bone hitting the bone, and that in essence is what arthritis is. Second thing that can happen is you can have sprains and or strains. Now a sprain is a ligament injury and a strain is more of a muscular injury. But if you've got a joint that moves too much, you could either damage the ligament or you could damage the muscle. So I'm just going to use a rubber band to kind of depict this. So imagine this rubber band is my ligament. In a normal situation, that ligament is going to stop my movement. So if I've got a joint and that joint starts to move, that rubber band now is starting to stretch and that ligament is stopping it from moving too much. Now if you have a really, really lax or hypermobile joint where that ligament doesn't have enough collagen, it's going to be a lot more lax. And now all of a sudden you see how much more that joint moves. Now if that joint moves too much, you can damage that ligament. If that joint moves too much, so if this joint starts moving too much, let's say it starts moving down too much, this is a muscle of the shoulder. If this joint moves down too far, that muscle could get pulled and that would lead to a strain. So you can either pull the ligament and sprain it, or you can pull the muscle and strain it. Thirdly, you can end up with bursitis and or tendonitis at these joints. A lot of our joints have what's called a bursa. The bursa is just a fluid-filled sac, and that fluid-filled sac sits inside the joint. I didn't draw it here, but just imagine in the shoulder, the bursa actually sits right underneath that ligament, so there would be like a fluid-filled sac sitting in that white space. If that joint is moving way too much, it could eventually compress, or it could eventually rub. It could really start causing some damage on that bursa, and that bursa could get inflamed, and that is what we call bursitis, and that can be an incredibly painful condition. And then finally, you can actually end up with some tendonitis. So the tendon is where muscle attaches to bone. You need a thickened piece right there. That's the tendon. That's the attachment of the muscle to the bone. And again, if this bone is moving too much because our ligaments are too mobile, that tendon could get pulled on and you could end up irritating that tendon and leading to a tendonitis. So we really need to know if we've got joint hypermobility. If we do, it's critical that you actually call a physical therapist and get set up with a preventative exercise program. Very important that you do that. So how are you going to determine if you've got joint hypermobility? You're going to do a 9-point test. Very simple to do. If you score more than 4 on this test, you have joint hypermobility, and you need to develop some sort of exercise program to prevent these from occurring. So the first part of the test is you basically just take your pinky and you want to pull back on your pinky. If my pinky goes beyond 90 degrees, so you're going to look at the angle right there. If that goes beyond 90 degrees or a right angle, and mine does not. Mine gets very, very close to 90 degrees, but it does not go beyond 90 degrees. So if my pinky went like to there, that would be beyond 90 degrees, and that would be considered a positive test. So you would give yourself 1 point there, and then you would do it on the other side. If it's positive on the other side, you would give yourself a 2nd point. The next thing that you do is you take your thumb and you want to pull your thumb down towards your forearm. If your thumb hits your forearm, that would be considered positive. Mine does not. There are many people who can easily get that thumb to hit their forearm. If you can do that, you would give yourself a point. You would do it on the other side. If you could do it on the other side, that also would be a point. Thirdly, you outstretch your arm and you look at the relationship of your wrist to your elbow. If your wrist is below your elbow, that would be considered positive and you would give yourself a point. Again, my wrist is in line with my elbow, so that is not a positive test. You would do that on both sides. So we're up to a potential 6 points at this time. Then you would sit and you would hyperextend your leg. Now, what I would actually recommend is that you put your leg on something so it kind of rests down. If your knee falls below your ankle while it's resting on something, so let's just do it this way so you see what I'm talking about. So you would just rest it on something. And if your knee goes below your ankle, which mine does not, mine is lined up with it, you would give yourself a point. And you would test both sides. So we're up to 8 points. Remember I said this is a 9-point system. So the final test is keeping your knees straight. You go down and try to get your palms flat on the ground. If you can reach the ground with your palms flat and your knees straight, that is a point. I can't do it. I would have to bend and then I can get it down. So I score a 0, which means I do not have joint hypermobility. If you score more than 4, you do. then you would need to give me a call and we'll get you set up on an exercise program. 218-346-2464. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching Wellness for Life. Brought to you by Back in Motion Physical Therapy, Gothenburg Chiropractic Clinic, Mahabi Ottawa Community Action Partnership, Natural Alternatives, and Lakeside Sports and Pain Clinic.